Clash Royale arena is home to some of the most high-skilled and talented troops in the entire Clash universe, with each troop specializing in their own unique strengths and having different abilities that separate them from each other. But the newest troop inside of the game aren't exactly what one would call the most skilled troops inside of the game. The new Royal recruits appear to be clumsy old regular villagers who just so happen to wind up inside the arena. So how did the regular old civilians end up becoming known as the Royal recruits? And later on, how did the Royal recruits get promoted to become the Knight and the Dark Prince? So here is the origin story on how the Royal recruits came into the world of Clash. More than 2 years ago, since the grand opening of the Clash Royale arena, it has taken a lot of people to maintain and keep the arenas in good condition and to ensure everything runs smoothly. And obviously the builders handled all the structural repairs and weapon detailing. However, the one troop that usually goes without any recognition is the regular civilian. The troops that keep the arena nice and clean, that repair the arena after each battle, and that organize the special challenges and tournaments. Without them, the Clash Royale arenas just wouldn't be the same. So finally, a few days ago, on a regular day in the Clash Royale arena, 6 of the civilians were getting ready to repair and clean up the arena after a really well fought battle. They were named Rick, Owen, Yandel, Aaron, Liam, and Everett. They wound up waiting on the sidelines waiting for the battle to finish since the battle ended up going to overtime, where things weren't looking pretty for the Blue King, since their tower hardly had any health left. Fortunately though, the other king didn't have any direct damaging spells that could finish off the last tower. So the Blue King was just trying to hold on for dear life. It was also an especially important and big battle since both kings were currently 11-2 in the Grand Challenge, so it was a winner-takes-all situation. The 6 civilians were getting really into the battle, just like all the other spectators watching. However, since it was the last battle of the day, the civilians were feeling really tired after a very eventful day. And especially Rick was feeling the worst of it, since he didn't get too much sleep due to fireworks outside his house the night before. And during the last 10 seconds of the battle, with the king's last attempt at taking down the tower, there was a gigantic push coming towards the Blue King's tower. The other king stood no chance against this push since he had absolutely no elixir left, and coming towards him was a giant, a balloon, and an archer combo. And unfortunately for Rick, that was the time where his lack of sleep really hit him. He ended up passing out and falling onto the battlefield. He fell right in front of the giant as he was approaching the tower, and then the giant was shocked to see this and he took one big step back by instinct. He ended up backing into the archers, who then misfired their shot and ended up hitting the balloon above them. The balloons ended up crashing down and taking out the archers and slowing down the giant just long enough to prevent him from getting another hit on the tower before the battle ended. The Blue King was so incredibly thrilled about this because this meant that he had another chance at getting that 12th win since they drawed the battle. And obviously the other king wasn't so happy about Rick's uncalled for interruption, however there was nothing he could do about it. After the battle, the Blue King came down to the battlefield and woke up his new so-called savior. Rick, who slept through the whole thing, was super confused as to what was happening, but the king told him that he just saved his tower and now he owed him a big one. So he told him that if there was anything he could do to repay him, to just let him know. Rick didn't really need to think too much about this since he already knew what he wanted. He asked the king to give him and his friends a chance to battle for real inside of the arena. The king thought this would be doable, especially since he could just test them out first in a classic challenge or a pointless 2v2 battle. So the king told him sure, he could do that. However, he doesn't have enough armor or gear for all 6 of his friends. But Rick replied that that would be okay. They would just find a bunch on their own. So before the next day of battle started, Rick and his 5 friends scavenged up all the leftover gear that they could. They found an old prototype version of the Dark Prince's helmet, and then they found some cheaply built guard shields. And then as well some of the knight's old and used armor. They were all set. Well, almost. When they went to meet the king the next day, the king quickly noted that they were all still holding their brooms from the other day, so he questioned why they were still holding them, and they replied with that it was their weapon. The king shook his head and was like, no way, you guys need real weapons, let me see what I can find for you. He came back a few minutes later with a bunch of spears that he apparently stole from the spear goblins, although he didn't really feel too bad about stealing it because the goblins were little pests who stole from everyone else. They probably weren't even their spears to begin with. Anyway, during their first battle, the king noted that these new temporary recruits were actually kind of useful. They weren't the most skilled attackers, but they sure could take a hit. And plus there is always power in numbers. So the king decided to make them a permanent recruit rather than just temporary ones. And since it was the king himself who recruited them, he gave them the name of the Royal Recruits. And throughout the next few days, people kept on trying out the royal recruits inside of the battle and started falling in love with them more and more as they started to become more and more popular. After the royal recruits had been accepted into the arena permanently by the kings, they quickly became one of the favorite troops to use. They were incredibly annoying to play against and were a bit overpowered, and as time went on they became better and better. They were just getting started and had so much more to offer to the Clash Royale League. Even with their hand-me-down crappy armor and weapons and lack of experience in the arenas, they were still dominating their opponents for the most part. After enough time and practice in the arena, they were able to perfectly counter most troops that they went up against. Except, of course, there were certain troops that they did have a very hard time going against. For example, one battle that really stuck out for one of the royal recruits in particular was against the Prince. The royal recruit's name was Owen, and it just seemed that every time he would enter onto the battlefield, the Prince would just come charging at him and absolutely destroy him. Now, usually this would be no big deal because stuff like that happens all of the time in the arena, and besides, usually his buddies would finish him off later anyways, and it is a team sport, so it didn't really bother him too much. But for some reason, this one in particular really seemed to make Owen mad, because the same thing happened over and over and over and over again, repeating more than 5 times in a row. So naturally that made him pretty angry, and he may have also come in accidentally contact with a rage spell, so that could have possibly added to his anger. So anyway, after getting his arse handed to him, Owen and the rest of the royal recruits, as well as the rest of the Clash Royale troops in the arena, all decided to head to the Clash bar after the battles were all done for the day. Everyone was already there, hogs were serving drinks, skeletons were trying their best to drink the elixir, bowlers were bowling, and all the other troops were socializing. The recruits all walked in together and ordered a few rounds of drinks, which in everyone's case was just regular old elixir. Owen ordered a few more drinks than everyone else because he was especially upset about how the day went, and he couldn't help but keep thinking back to how he got embarrassed by the Prince in the battles that day. And while he was drinking, he looked over to his right and saw that the Prince was there talking and laughing with all of his friends. He was pretty popular, being one of the royal troops and being the prince to the king. He looked like he was having a great time as he was also celebrating another successful day in the arena, and Owen really envied him for all of this, and he thought to himself that this was BS. He could easily take on the Prince if they were just on an even playing field. The Prince's pony gave him an unfair advantage, plus he had all of the best armor and weapons in the entire arena. So Owen thought, what if he could fight the Prince next time where they each had the same armor and no pony? Then he could for sure show him who was really the best. But before he could even think about how he was going to do that, he realized that he couldn't just steal the Prince's pony, since he would just as easily be able to grab another one from the royal stable. So rather than making it so that the Prince didn't have a horse, he thought maybe he could make it a fair playing field just by getting his own pony and upgrading his armor. So before he went home for the night, he went outside and stole the Prince's pony. Well, at least he tried to steal the Prince's pony, because he actually wasn't able to steal the pony because the pony was extremely loyal to the Prince, and he refused to go anywhere with Owen. And while Owen was trying to get the pony to go with him, the witch came outside and saw what he was doing. She went over to Owen and told him, "If you want this pony to follow your command, I know a spell that can do that for you, but in exchange I'll need something from you in return." Owen thought about it. He really wanted to be given the best possible opportunity to succeed in the arena and show the Prince what he could really do. But at the same time, he knew that the witch was a dark-minded troop who could possibly ask him to do something really bad. But after pondering it for a little bit, he came to the conclusion that he didn't want to live the rest of his life in the arena getting ragdolled by the Prince or any other troop for that matter. So he turned to the witch and told her, "What do you need from me?" Once Owen asked the witch what she wanted him to do, a creepy, satisfied smile grew on the witch's face. She turned to Owen and said, "Perfect. In return for my spell, all I need you to do is go and steal me the power potion from the Clash of Clans village. This one spell was specifically created by the builders and wizards, and for some reason I just can't recreate it. And I would go steal it myself, but they have the village on high lockdown ever since my last attempt, and they're keeping their eye out for me. They think I'm going to attack their village every time I show up, so that's why I need someone like you, who isn't actually a threat to the village and isn't a known troop to the Clash of Clans village. So all you have to do is sneak in there and grab me one simple power potion from the Clan Castle magic item storage, and then I will grant you the spell to get your horse to obey you without any hesitation." Owen thought about it. He knew that what the witch was asking could be quite dangerous and stealing is considered super wrong, but he also really wanted to be given the opportunity to be better in the arena. So finally he decided that yes, he will go and steal the power potion for the witch. So he and the witch shook hands and the witch explained in more detail exactly where to go and how to get it. And then he departed for the Clash of Clans village. The village wasn't too far away, nor was it too hard to find. He just had to follow a simple path and then listen for the sound of cannons firing and barbarians yelling. When he came across the very first village that he saw, he crept up behind the walls and began scanning for the so-called Clan Castle magic item storage. He gazed around until his eyes locked on a building that looked exactly like the witch had described to him. He also noticed how this clan castle seemed to be pretty central to everything. Plus, there were troops roaming all around it because the army camps were pretty much surrounding the clan castle from all sides. So he was going to have to wait until nighttime to get in there without being seen. So he went and sat in the forest while he waited for the sun to go down. When the sun had finally set, he went back to go and check on the clan castle, but unfortunately it looked like the troops here didn't really sleep, since the village could attack or be attacked at any point during the day, 24/7. So Owen was going to have to find another way in without being seen. Lucky for Owen, he noticed that there were some gold mines very close to the clan castle, and thanks to some information he remembered the miner telling him a long time ago, apparently all of the gold mine tunnels were connected. So all he had to do was find a gold mine on the outside of the base and then follow the tunnel to the gold mine by the clan castle. So he looked around until he finally came across a gold mine, and he went down into the tunnels, and then after a bit of walking, he poked his head up in one of the other gold mines, and boom, he was standing right outside of the clan castle. He walked inside and grabbed the power potion that the witch had described, and then he turned and dashed out the door and back into the mines without being seen. He popped out again outside of the walls, and then he began making his way back to the Clash Royale arena. On his way back, Owen had a lot of time to think. He mainly thought about how his entire life he had never done a single wrong thing before, and now here he was being corrupted by power and becoming a thief. But nonetheless, the deed was already done and he was already on his way back. But even with that, the thought of corruption that had overtaken his mind was still sitting at the back of his head. Anyway, when he finally got back, he handed the witch the power potion as they agreed, and then the witch got ready to follow through on her end. And then she handed one small bowl of the spell to Owen and then gave the other small bowl to the horse. As they both drank the spell, we brewed the special spell for Owen and the horse, which explained that by each of you drinking the spell, it will connect you guys mentally, and you will be able to work in perfect synchronization, just like the prince and his pony. However, since Owen had his mind so focused on the bad things that he had just done, the spell ended up reacting a bit differently with him, by giving him a bit of a dark essence. Nothing too much, but just enough to give him that dark beam. So now that Owen was able to work perfectly with his horse, the only thing that was missing was high quality armor to put on the same level as the prince. Then the witch used her power potion on herself and she got a nice little buff. And then Owen went off to go find where else he could get the best possible armor. And where else to get the best possible armor other than from the builder himself. Luckily for Owen, the builder owed him a big one, since Owen had been helping the builder for years back when he kept the builder's arenas in tip-top shape. So he simply asked the builder to create him some of the best possible armor for him and his horse. So the builder got to work and worked his magic. He came back a few hours later and then fitted them in some of the strongest and most badass looking armor in the entire arena. Then finally he handed him his brand new weapon, a malice, that would be able to sweep troops off their feet and knock back multiple enemies at once. Owen was incredibly excited to go and test everything out in the arena, and after a full day's worth of battling, it turned out that he still couldn't beat the prince in a one-on-one battle. However, he could take out lots of enemies that the prince himself couldn't. And Owen was happy enough with that. He had officially become the Dark Prince, and thanks to his trusty pony, no one bothered to question his royalty status, since ponies would only respond to actual royalty. So there it is, the story of how the royal recruit became the Dark Knight.